Are there any matters that we need to place on the record before bringing the jurors in?
Not from the prosecution, Your Honor.
Nothing on behalf of Mr. Barber, Your Honor.
All rise for the jury. Are you be seated, ladies and gentlemen? Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Welcome back to Court 4B. At this time, we will continue with the state's presentation of its evidence. You may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We'll call the Detective Hughes.
Morning, sir.
Good morning. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as you shall answer unto God, or under the pains and penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
You may be seated.
Thank you. Good morning.
Keep your voice up so that the ladies and gentlemen of the jury can hear you. And if you would please, for the record, state your name, spelling your last.
Arthur William Hughes, H-U-G-H-E-S.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, before you hear from Detective Hughes, I have another stipulation that has been provided on behalf of the parties. And again, these are facts that have been agreed to by the parties. I'm going to read this stipulation into the record and again ask that you listen while I do so. The parties agree and stipulate that the following keepers of records, if called to testify, would testify that the records provided during this investigation are fair and accurate copies of the original records. These records are from PNC Bank, Food Mart, R&M Carryout, Kroger, Speedy Mart, Fine Fare Food Mart, City Trends, C-I-T-I Trends, Hollywood Casino, Pick and Go Market, Sprint, T-Mobile, Google, Ohio State Highway Patrol, Vern Rife Center, DSW. Okay, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning.
You said Arthur, but I called you Art. Do you go by Art?
Art's fine.
I will call you Detective Hughes, but
All right.
where do you currently work?
Columbus Police Department.
How long have you worked there?
Since 1994,
What is your current assignment there?
I work in SWAT.
How long have you worked in SWAT?
It'll be a year, March.
Can you walk us through your work history at Columbus Police Department?
I started in 1994. For my first 10 years, I worked as a patrol officer and an FTA officer, a field training officer. 2004, I went into the Bureau, a short time in sexual assault. From there, I went into robbery for 10 years. From robbery, I went into homicide. Worked homicide for 5 years, and I was also a CERT detective, critical incident response team, and also assisted in training new detectives.
Okay, you used a lot of terms there. You said you went into the Bureau.
Detective Bureau.
Okay, so when you were in sexual assault, robbery, and homicide, you were acting as a detective.
Yes.
And you mentioned CERT. You said critical incident response team.
Yes, that's correct.
What kinds of things would you investigate there?
Police involved incidents, police shootings and custody deaths, police where the officers are actually the victims of a homicide.
And was that at the same time as being a homicide detective?
Yes.
And then you also trained other detectives, you said?
Yes.
Would you explain, I want to focus in on your role as a homicide detective. Would you please explain for the jury very generally what your responsibilities were?
As a homicide detective, obviously we respond to deaths, homicides, suspicious deaths, child deaths, suicides.
What kinds of things as a homicide detective would you do?
As a homicide detective, obviously we respond to the scene. Once we respond to this thing, especially like a homicide, we respond as a team. Usually everybody on shift would respond. Depending on who the lead detective was, you'd have your lead, you'd have a secondary, and the secondary would be responsible for the scene. The other detectives would do canvass, talk to other witnesses, where the lead would generally talk to the main witnesses. The secondary also assists with the lead, gathering information.
So if I understand that right, you would have somebody who's in charge, and then you'd have like a backup secondary detective.
That's correct.
And then the other homicide detectives would assist in whatever ways the primary needed.
Yes, that's correct.
Did you have an opportunity during your time in homicide to be the primary on investigations?
Several.
Do you know approximately how many homicide investigations you've been involved in?
Not too many to count. Just in 2018, I probably had 12 to 15.
And that's just that year?
Yes.
And you were in there for you were in homicide for approximately 5 years?
Yes, that's correct.
What shift did you work when you were on homicide?
Second shift, which is 3 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Were you called to assist in the investigation for this case?
Yes, I was.
Would you let the ladies and gentlemen of the jury know where the primary scene was located?
3044 Allegheny Avenue, Apartment B.
Is that here in Franklin County, Ohio?
Yes, it is.
Can you describe for the jury approximately what part of town is this?
It's the east side. It's near the airport, just right off of James Road, almost where James and Stelzer Road become. It's the same road, but it changes names. But it's just south of the airport.
Who was the lead initially on the case?
Detective Tim Welsh.
Tim Welsh?
Yes.
Did that change at some point?
Yes, it did.
When did it change?
Not too far into the investigation, he had already a scheduled vacation, so at that time I took over as lead.
You answered my next question. Did it become your case then?
Yes, it did.
And you said pretty quickly?
It's one of the first few days, I think the first week. I can't recall the exact day.
When you first, or when the call first came in, what was your original assignment?
Scene detective.
Would that have made you the secondary or the backup detective?
Secondary, yes, that's correct.
Do you recall who first arrived at the scene from homicide?
It was, I believe it was Detective Welsh and myself. We drove together.
And when you arrived there, was the scene still secured?
Yes, it was. We were there with the first responding officer. Was first one we came in contact with was Officer Scalfani.
Now you mentioned then that you were in charge of the scene, so what was your specific role?
So initially, we entered the scene, which we were told where everything was at the time from the responding officer. So we went inside, just did a brief look around and see what we had. And initially, when we entered the scene, I just kind of gathered information I need and I backed back out.
You mentioned that you got information for where everything was from the first responder.
Yeah, like the location of the deceased.
Okay. I just want to be clear, he hadn't done a crime scene search or anything like that.
No.
I'm going to show you a photograph. May I approach, Your Honor, please?
You may.
I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as State's Exhibit A1. Do you recognize that?
Yes, that is location of a homicide.
Your Honor, may I have the PowerPoint, please, or the screen?
You may. You may.
I'm just going to put this pointer up here if you need
Okay.
it at any point.
Certainly, thank you.
Do you remember approximately what time you arrived at the scene?
It was, I believe it was beginning of the shift, so I think it was between 3 and 4. The correct time, I don't recall.
We have up on the big screen there, State's Exhibit A1. Would you just describe for the jury what they're looking at in this photograph?
Apartment B is going to be the location of the homicide. Apartment C is obviously the apartment, which would be west of apartment B.
And
The-
apartment C is the one with the light on?
Yes, that's correct.
We see some sort of tape on the front of that. What's that?
That is a crime scene tape.
Is that pretty standard to use at all of these scenes?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Right, you mentioned that you do a walkthrough and back out. Why do you do a walkthrough?
Well, obviously, to determine what we're going to need. Initially, when we call crime scene, they want to know what kind of scene we have, whether it's a shooting, stabbing, whatever we need, and it determines what kind of equipment that they bring out. So we go in and just kind of assess what's going on and what we have.
When you go in and do that walkthrough, do you touch anything?
No.
Do you do anything to ensure that other people do not touch anything?
Yes. Well, obviously, we have the officers there guarding the scene, and we don't allow anybody in without obviously talking to the scene detective, which would have been me.
And I was just gonna say, was that part of your responsibility on January 29th?
Yes.
So after you did your walkthrough here, did you contact some crime scene detectives?
Yes. We called our crime scene detectives out to the scene initially.
Now, I should ask, you talked about calling crime scene detectives. Is that ever your job to process the scene?
No, not at all.
You said that like, no
No.
way. Okay, on cases, do you have this team that responds on cases like a homicide?
Yes, we have an on-duty crime scene unit they respond to anything we ask them to come to help to.
And when you say we, are you talking about Columbus Police Department?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And you called your own crime scene search unit initially?
Initially, yes.
And why did you eventually end up calling the Bureau of Criminal Identification?
We discussed the scene and what was going on inside the scene, and we wasn't really uncertain at the time if the deceased would have been moved from the original spot where she was found in the closet. Our crime scene detectives don't have access or availability to the material used to look for blood, hemoglobin, which would have been like a blue star material, which they could spray on carpet, flooring, and it'll show if there had been blood there at one time.
Are you talking about like if we've seen a crime show where they spray something and they show an alternate light and it kind of lights up?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Were you asking if your police department could do that?
Yes, so we brought them out and discussed that, and instead of taking a chance of having our crime scene process the scene, then having to call another unit in, we decided to let BCI do it.
Okay. And did BCI eventually respond?
Yes, they did.
Now, when they came to the scene, did you ask them about the ability to use that kind of spray in the light?
Absolutely.
And?
Yes, they can. It's available to them.
But was this an appropriate scene for them to do it?
Yes, I thought it would have been at the time, yes.
Did they think it was?
Once they went inside and looked around, they didn't think it would have been necessary, no.
And in that kind of situation, do you defer to the specialists that work crime scenes?
Yes.
Was BCI able to respond right away?
No, they're located, depending on where their investigators are, they live in different parts of the state, so sometimes it does take a while for them to get there.
And when you say a little while, what are we talking about?
Sometimes take an hour, a couple hours.
But we're not talking about days or anything?
No, oh no, they responded that night.
We heard from Agent Durst yesterday. Is he one of the agents that responded to the scene?
Yes, he was.
When Agent Durst and his partner got to the scene, what did you do with them?
Took them inside as well, explained to them what we knew at the time and what we had, and then turned the scene over to them.
Why do you walk them through the scene?
Giving them information that what we had, and obviously showing them the scene and what we know, the information that we know at that time.
When they go through the scene, do they ever come back to you or collect additional things that you didn't point out to them?
Actually, they've collected quite a bit of evidence. They were very thorough.
Okay. And at that point, while you're walking through with them, did you make sure they didn't touch anything?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So while they're processing the apartment, what did you do?
Stayed outside and made myself available to them. Just stayed outside the scene.
At any point, did you have to go in the scene and document anything they were doing?
They brought us in and showed us all the evidence that they collected and how they documented it. They gave us the sheets of all the evidence they collected. And then at the point where it was time to call the coroner's office, that's when we went back in.
Okay. I want to come back to that, the piece about the coroner's office, but first I want to talk about a vehicle in this case. You had mentioned the deceased. What was her name?
Rachael Anderson.
Were you able to identify her?
Yes.
Were you also able to locate her car?
Yes.
Where did you locate that car?
It was within an apartment complex. It was parked in the units that would have been just west and south of her unit.
And did you or another detective document the location of her car?
I believe in my crime scene, it's documented in there.
May I approach her?
You may. Is that exhibit marked?
It is, Your Honor. But I don't believe it's on your list.
Oh, okay.
It's an addition. I have shown you what's been marked as State's Exhibit Y1. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And just very generally, what is that?
That is Miss Anderson's car.
Does it appear to be a fair and accurate photograph of the location of her car on January 29th of 2018?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, may I publish this photograph?
Any objection?
No objection.
You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Detective Hughes, I am going to ask you to use the pointer here.
Okay.
Can you show the jurors, I know there's one car in that photograph, but would you use the pointer and show them Rachel's car, please?
Certainly. It's right there.
And is there anything set up to protect her car from being entered or touched by other people?
Yes, crime scene tape set up as well.
Can you use the pointer and show that to the jury, please?
It's right there.
Okay. And you had mentioned something about it being around the corner?
Yes, so Miss Anderson's apartment would have been right here. From side to side, her apartment runs east to west and faces north. This unit here faces the west, so this would have been the north end, this is the south end, and her unit, the rear of her apartment would have been right around here.
Okay, so her back door would have been closer to the car?
Yes,
Was there parking available in front of her apartment?
yes,
Okay. Now, we see that it's secured.
yes,
Was the car also part of your responsibility as part of the scene?
yes.
What, if anything, did you have done with that car after it was secured and taped off?
So that night, we had it impounded, taken to our impound lot and secured in a facility, and it was also followed by one of our patrol officers all the way to the impound lot to ensure that it was secured.
Thank you. How did they get it there? Does somebody drive it?
No, it's on a tow truck, yeah.
I need to ask.
I'm sorry.
Okay, just making sure. And then we heard from Agent Durst yesterday. Did you ask him to do anything about, with regard to this car?
Yes, he processed the car for me.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. So going back to the apartment itself, you had mentioned that when a representative from the coroner's office showed up, you went back in.
Yes.
Can you explain that to the jury, please?
The coroner's office?
Yeah, so first of all, why do they come out?
They come out to just do their preliminary investigation. They come out, they photograph everything as well. They don't collect any evidence. They photograph the body where it was found. Then once we bring the body out, they'll document any injuries that would have been to the body.
Is it one of the doctors or someone else from the coroner's
It's one of their technicians. With that information, they supply that information to the pathologist and to aid with their investigation during the autopsy.
So when, did a tech show up?
Yes,
At
yes.
this residence?
Yes.
And what did you do when the coroner's office tech showed up?
I escorted her up to where Miss Anderson's body was found.
And where was that?
It would have been the upstairs bedroom that would have been on the north side of the apartment.
Did you remain in that bedroom?
Yes, at that
What-
time, yes.
And what did you observe when you were up there?
The agents from BCI pulled Miss Anderson from the closet, placed her out on a blanket, and eventually onto the body bag. At that time, some additional photographs were taken. Same with the coroner's office. They photographed everything and photographed the materials that was on her.
Okay. May I approach her?
You may.
Detective, I have given you what's been previously marked for identification as State's Exhibit A140. Do you recognize that?
Yes,
What is that a photograph of?
it's Miss Anderson.
Your Honor, permission to publish?
Any objection?
Can you explain for the jury, just in the process, what we see in A140?
That was, that'd be Miss Anderson after she was removed from the closet and placed on a body bag.
Placed on the body bag?
Body bag, yes, for transport.
Okay, and then did you observe, we heard yesterday about the swabbing and collecting of evidence here from Agent Durst. Did you observe all of that?
Yes, I did.
And the coroner's tech was present while that was happening?
Yes.
Did the coroner's tech touch anything or interfere with the collection of that evidence by Agent Durst in any way?
No,
How about you?
no,
Anybody else?
no.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. At that point, yeah. I'll come up there. Just to retrieve these. Thank you. At that point, what does the coroner's office do, or what did they do?
They take the information, photographs, and everything back to the pathologist.
And then was she eventually removed?
Yes,
Her body was eventually removed?
yes.
Where was it taken and by whom?
It was taken by Columbus Police in one of our transport vehicles to the morgue.
In a secure vehicle?
Yes, by officers.
Do you recall approximately what time the coroner's tech left?
I believe it was after 1 o'clock.
In the morning?
Yes,
So had you been at the scene for quite a while at this
yes,
point?
yes.
So while all these things were going on, in terms of you kind of working the scene, securing the car, Miss Anderson, her body being processed and removed, do you know what other detectives were doing at the scene?
Initially, we had other detectives respond as well. They were doing canvass and interviewing witnesses and locating other people of interest.
You've mentioned the word canvas, just for people that might not know what that is.
Canvass, whenever we have, obviously, an incident like this, we have detectives knock on doors, go to businesses, looking for any witnesses, any information that would help with the investigation.
And when you became the lead, did you become responsible for all of the information in the case?
Yes.
Were you able to determine whether or not there was anything of value that came from the canvas?
No, there wasn't.
At some point, were you able to leave the scene?
Yes.
Do you recall when that was?
It would have been right after the coroner's office left the scene.
Now, you had mentioned that you work 3 to 11,
Yes,
3 p.m. to 11 p.m.
yes.
This might sound like a silly question, but when your shift is over, do you just leave?
No, that's our schedule hours, our duty hours. Of course, a lot of times we come in early, leave late. Sometimes we don't go home for hours.
Okay.
Can be a couple days sometimes.
Were you able, when you left the scene, did you do anything to make sure it was secure, or was it released at that point?
No, we ensure that there's a guard duty. We place officers in the front and back to secure the entryway, both the back door and front door, to make sure nobody enters the residence.
Were you able to lock it?
No,
Did you ever locate, or did you or BCI that night locate Miss Anderson's keys to the apartment?
no,
How about her car keys?
no.
At any point in the investigation, did you recover her keys or her car keys?
No.
You had mentioned for us that Ms. Anderson had been transported to the coroner's office.
That's correct.
When you have a homicide, what does the coroner's office do?
They do their autopsy.
And was one done in this particular case?
Yes.
Were you present for that?
No, I was not.
Is learning, is there any value to you in learning the results of the autopsy?
Yes, it can be, yes, absolutely.
So did you do anything in order to learn about those details?
Yes, I went and spoke to the pathologist.
And after you spoke to the pathologist, what was your next step?
We went back to the scene with the agents from BCI and just did a final walkthrough.
And can you tell us when, in relation to having been at the scene that very first day into the night, when was the autopsy?
It had been the next morning.
So now we're talking about January 30th?
Yes,
Did you return to her apartment that same day or on another day?
same day.
What is the purpose of returning to the scene after speaking with the pathologist?
Sometimes there's information obtained from the pathologist. Say if we have a shooting, if we determine that the victim's maybe shot 5 times, we're going to go back and look for maybe 5 shell casings or projectiles. It helps with maybe locating additional evidence.
And were you able to accomplish that walkthrough?
Yes, we did.
When you returned to the scene, was the guard duty still present?
Yes,
Scene was still secured?
yes.
When you looked at the scene, that first night that you were there on the 29th, did you see any signs of forced entry?
No.
Is that something that you would look for?
Yes.
I do want to talk a little bit about a closet that was downstairs
Yes.
on the first floor. Do you recall looking in that closet?
Yes, it was a coat closet just at the base of the stairs if you're walking down the stairs right on the left-hand side.
Do you recall anything else in that closet?
I remember looking inside briefly and seeing like a paper box that would contain paper, copier paper. And inside that box looked like Halloween decorations.
Did you search through that box?
No.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury why you didn't search through that box?
The whole scene was processed by BCI and that we determined everything was thoroughly gone through. Looking down into the box, nothing of evidentiary value was seen at that time.
Did you dig around in the box?
No, no.
Did you become aware of that box later on?
Yes, I was.
Okay. The jury previously heard about you being contacted by Rachel's mother, Patricia.
Yes.
Or Trish.
Yes.
Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
What, if anything, do you recall about the positioning of the knife in the box?
I remember her telling me that it was positioned in the corner of the box.
Hold on one second. Please approach, just for a quick second. Excuse us, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Hold on one moment, Ms. Rouse. All right. Okay, the objection is sustained. Please rephrase.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Hughes, without saying what Ms. Anderson said to you, were you able to determine from her the position of the knife when she found it?
Yes.
Based on the information she gave you, were you surprised you hadn't immediately seen it?
I was informed it was in a position, it would have been,
You can't say that.
it would have been, okay.
Based on what she told you about the position of the knife, were you surprised that you didn't immediately see it when you looked in the box?
No.
Thank you. All right, after you did this second walkthrough, after, on the 30th, after you've been with the coroner, did you still keep the scene secure?
No, we closed the scene down at that time.
Would you explain to the jury what it means to close a scene?
We shut down the guard duty. It's no longer under police control. And we pretty much leave the scene and we're done. We're completed with it. And it would have been turned over at that time to the management to lock it and secure it.
And you said to the management to lock it and secure it?
Yeah, in this situation, that's what would have happened. Other situations, maybe the family have been turned back over to the family or the residents of people who live there.
In that situation, when you turn it over to a family or somebody like that, are they in charge of securing it?
Yes.
In this case, did you have any way to secure the apartment?
No. No.
During the course, actually, strike that, I apologize, Carla. Is that a normal procedure for you, to close the scene and release it?
Yes.
Just want to make sure that it's not, on TV where the scene is open forever or closed forever and people can't come in and
No.
until we go to trial or something like that.
That's TV drama.
Okay. When you were at the scene and BCI was processing it, did you determine if anything was missing from her apartment that you might have the ability to track?
Her debit card, yes.
Did you have to figure out where she banked?
Yes,
How did you figure that out?
the family.
And what did you do as a result of figuring out where she banked?
Made contact with what's been the head of investigative security, which was Nikki Morris at PNC Bank.
Is that
And
the bank she was with, PNC?
PNC, yes.
What's the purpose of making contact with people like that?
Get copy of the records, transactions during the time of this homicide.
Would you explain to the jury why you do that? Why are bank records something you look for?
If in a case of a robbery, or in this case, the debit card was continually being used after the death of Ms. Anderson, that'd help us obtain any information, evidence, witnesses. Also to depend on where the card's used to obtain surveillance footage.
You spent some time as a robbery detective.
10 years.
Are you familiar with tracking down bank records and looking at them for what we would call unusual activity?
Yes.
Did you do that in this case as well?
Yes, it did.
You may.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm going to stand up here with you for a minute if you don't
That's
mind.
fine.
I'm going to show you what's been previously marked for identification as State's Exhibit K1. Can you tell the jury what that is, please?
It's a bank statement, something you generally get in the mail from your bank, just showing your activity.
Or online if we don't get paper documents?
That's correct.
You still get paper statements, Detective?
Yes, I do.
All right. I'm judging you. Can you tell me whose bank records those are?
This is Rachael Anderson's bank records.
And does that appear to be a fair and accurate copy of one set of records you got from PNC Bank?
Yes.
Okay. I'm now going to show you what's been previously marked for identification as State's Exhibit K2. Will you take a look at that for me, please?
This would have been the records that I actually received from Ms. Morris,
And who was Miss Morris again?
the head of investigative security at PNC Bank. Is it VP?
Okay. And explain to the jury, what is K2? I know you said there are records that you got from them, but do they look like K1?
No, it's almost like a spreadsheet style.
And does it contain different information than K1?
No. No.
Does
it's-
it contain additional information?
I don't believe so.
All right. Permission to publish, Your Honor?
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
May I use that one, Your Honor?
You may.
Okay. All right, so I have here State's Exhibit K1 that I'm showing. And was this the one that you said most of us would get either in the mail or electronically, like a bank statement?
Yes, that's correct.
And then State's Exhibit K2 is going to be a little bit harder to read here. Actually, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see certain things. Scratch that. I'm going to zoom out. Is this what you mean by a spreadsheet type display?
Yeah, obviously it doesn't print out very well like a spreadsheet would.
Okay. And as we go through here, does it contain similar information that as K1 for
Yes.
bank records?
Yes.
I do see some other columns here. Now I'm going to zoom in. What is this column right here that I'm pointing to?
Denied access.
So whether or not something was approved or denied by the bank?
Yes.
Now, is that something that would be different from K1 like we would all get?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
It's not on that statement.
And how about this column? What's this column?
That's the limit, obviously limited, exceeded of the withdrawal, the denial reason.
Okay. And so on this, do we have certain situations where Miss Anderson's card was denied?
Yes.
And what does this column show for those reasons?
Obviously the exceeded limit and incorrect PIN.
As you started to go through these records, based on your training and experience, did you notice anything in these records?
Yes, I noticed she went to a lot of restaurants. She used her card at a lot of restaurants. And on the date, which would have been the 28th, it changed.
What was, actually, let's see, I'm going to go to for purposes of the record, the 4th page of K1. So again, K1 would be the bank record that you and I would look at?
Yes.
Okay. And what do you see on here?
Bob Evans, Dairy Mart, Starbucks, Jimmy John's, Taco Bell, Panera, Wendy's.
Okay. Her metabolism had not caught up with her yet, right? Okay.
Obviously.
Right. So is that what you're talking about, various food places?
Pretty much what I use mine for.
Oh,
Yeah.
noted. All right. And then, starting, now I should say here, we have some dates on here. Now, are these necessarily the date it was used or the date it cleared?
I think a lot of those are a date that cleared.
Okay. So then later on, do we see a change in that behavior?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what we're looking at on the 5th page of K1?
You're seeing a lot of ATM withdrawals.
Okay. All right. And did that continue throughout until her card was turned off?
Yes.
And on State's Exhibit K2, do we also see some addresses located in one of the columns?
Yes.
Okay. And what's this first column we see?
That date address, the dates of use or clearing date,
Okay. And what is local date and time?
the time it would have been used.
Okay. And did you do anything when you got these, let's see, 3 pages of activity from PNC Security?
Yes, I began to follow up on those addresses.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. And you said you started to call on those?
Actually, responded personally with evidence tech. At that time, Detective Welsh was still here. He hadn't left yet.
Did you assist in obtaining the?
Oh, yes, yes.
Going out?
I was there.
So as a secondary, is the scene your only responsibility?
Yes. Well, yeah, you follow up on stuff like that, and you do assist the lead.
Okay. So you started to respond to these addresses?
Yes.
What was the point in responding to the addresses?
Looking for surveillance.
Were you able to obtain surveillance from some of these locations?
Most of them, yes.
And you say most of them, what do you mean by that?
Not all of them had surveillance or made it available.
Now, when you went out to get surveillance, can you tell me not the camera setup, but if every place only had one camera or something else?
Now, some places had several cameras. They might have outside surveillance, inside surveillance, behind the counter surveillance. So it varies from place to place.
And did you go with anybody else when you went out to these scenes or to the locations where Rachel's card had been used?
We took it evidence tech.
What's the purpose of taking an evidence tech?
That's what they do. They have the ability to recover from any type of equipment. They're familiar with the equipment, different types of surveillance
Okay. And,
equipment to pull the video. So
and for the locations that did have surveillance or that were willing to give it to you, were the evidence techs able to pull that
Yes.
video surveillance?
yes, and in a couple instances, actually the owners would provide the video themselves. They'd extract it and pull it themselves, like DSW or the casino.
And you had mentioned that some of the places have more than one camera. Did you have an opportunity to view all of the camera angles?
Yes.
And was there always something of evidentiary value on all of the camera angles?
Not all of them, no.
And as a result of that, did we put together an exhibit that contains the relevant surveillance videos where you can actually see people or things that you found to be relevant to the investigation?
Yes.
You may. You may.
I am showing you what's been previously marked for identification as States Exhibit L1. Very generally, what is that?
It's a external hard drive, flash drive.
Okay. And prior to your testimony, did I show you that we had put the relevant surveillance on this?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Did it appear to be fair and accurate copies of the surveillance you or the evidence techs or the owners collected and you made part of your investigation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You had mentioned that there were some places where you were not able to get surveillance. Do you remember which places those were?
The BP station at James and Maine, I believe the U.S. Bank, and I believe there's also another gas station. I believe it was at on Livingston. It was just east of James Road. I can't recall that station's name.
Now, for those locations, did you have bank records from K1 or K2 indicating that Rachel's card had been used after the last contact had been made with her?
Yes,
And you just weren't able to get anything from them?
that's correct.
Right. I want to talk about the places you were able to get things from.
Okay.
Let's start with the Food Mart at 3351 East Main Street. Do you know approximately how far that was from Rachel's house? Or apartment, I should say?
It's fairly close. I'd say within a 1.5 2 mile radius.
And can you tell me if this was the first place her card was used or someplace else?
I believe that was the first place it was used.
It's gonna take us just a second. Your Honor, if we could. Have the computer.
You have it.
of the jury, can you just tell us where we are, what we're looking at in this particular video from the Food Mart on East Main?
This is the outside surveillance camera. It is, so right here would be Main Street. This direction would be west. And actually, Main Street, this would be, I believe it's Wyant. So it's an intersection of Wyant and Main.
And I see some numbers up at the top there.
Yeah, that'd be the date and time of the footage.
What is the date and time on this one?
That would be 9/43 and January 28th, 2018.
Okay. And when it says, you said 9:43, but it actually says 21:43. Explain that to me.
It's military time.
Okay, all right. You had a little tone there with me.
I'm sorry.
I know it's military time, just asking. Okay. What I'm gonna do here for our purposes is, and for purposes of the record, I'm gonna advance us to about the 1 minute mark. Actually, if you can look down here towards the bottom, approximately how long is this video?
I can't see it on the screen.
Can you see it on the big screen? If I told you
I've-
it's 16:50.
It's out of the corner.
Oh.
If I told you it said 16:50.
I would believe you. I have good eyesight, but not that good.
All right. I'm gonna go ahead and advance it to about a minute. Now, I'm gonna pause it right there.
Okay.
Can you see under the bright light there?
Yes.
Can you tell me what are we about to see happen?
You're seeing a vehicle pull into the lot from East Main Street?
Did you note anything of importance about that vehicle?
Yes. At the time of the viewing of this surveillance, we were at the location of the store. And we didn't know at the time, but that was Rachel's car. And we didn't know it was ever removed from the scene. So this is the first time we found out her car was used.
I'm gonna play it here a little bit longer. And is that what we see moving into the frame now?
Yes. It's a pretty identifiable car.
What kind of car was it?
Chevy Spark, like pink.
Okay. Can you use your laser pointer, and I know we saw it come in, but just show the jurors where it's parked?
Right there.
Okay. I'm going to fast forward now. I should ask you, does anybody exit or enter the car for a couple of minutes?
It's a few minutes for somebody gets out of the car.
Okay, I'm gonna go forward to about 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Actually, I think I have it at 3:08 for the record. What are we watching now?
You watch a gentleman exit through the passenger side of the car. It's Mr. Sleep.
Did you know that's who it was at the time?
No, I didn't.
You later identified him?
Yes.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Okay.
Which side of the car did he get out of?
Passenger side.
During this video, did you observe anybody exit the driver's side door?
No.
Did you observe other activity from the driver's side of the car?
Yes, it did.
I'm going to advance to about 4:30. I'm gonna actually be at 4:28 for purposes of the record. What are we gonna watch for?
You're going to see a hand come out of the window and wipe down the side of the car.
Did it just happen?
Yes, it did.
I'm gonna back it up, because I think it might have been hard to see. Will you, when I have it paused, will you use the laser pointer and show us where we're supposed to look?
It's going to be right here.
right there?
Yes,
Okay, so that was at approximately 4:39, and it's still happening,
yes,
and now it's done.
yep,
Okay. Eventually, through the rest of this, do you see Mr. Sleet exit and the car leave?
yes,
I'm gonna click to another video where you're also able to obtain interior surveillance.
that's correct.
And this is still the Food Mart at
Yes.
3351.
Yes,
I should ask, you mentioned the date and the timestamp. Did this also match up with a transaction for Rachel's bank account?
yes, it did.
What I'm gonna do is I'm going to forward to about minute 3:43. Oh, sorry. Actually, 3:40 for purposes of the record. Is that the person that we just saw walk in?
Yes, it is.
Can you use your laser pointer and show the jury who we're talking about?
He is right here, and right in front of him is the ATM machine.
All right, now, for the interest of time, I'm going to move this in front of the jury. As we do this, I'm fast forwarding. How long is he at that ATM?
He's there for quite a bit of time.
All right, did he just leave at
Yes.
about the 9-minute mark?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And then does it then pick up at the other video that I was just mentioning to the jury we just looked at where I mentioned he gets in the car and leaves?
Yes.
Okay. I want to move on then to the R&M carryout. Oh, sorry, apologize. The R&M carryout. Where is that located?
It is just further east on Main Street at the intersection of Main and Barnett.
And did this also match up with anything on Rachel's bank account?
Yes, it did.
I'm going to go to the second video here first. I'm going to advance to around the 3-minute, 39-second mark. .338 for purposes of the record. What do we see happening up there? Will you use your pointer and show us?
You see Miss Anderson's car pulling onto the lot.
Okay, what are we seeing happen now?
The same gentleman getting out of the passenger side.
Can you use your pointer and show the jury?
He's right there.
Pretty dark, so-
Yeah, he's right there.
Okay. Which side of the car did he get out of?
Passenger side.
I'm going to do the same thing here where I forward it in front of the jury. Stop it around 9:56 and play it again. What do we see happening now?
You see the gentleman walking out and approaching Miss Anderson's car. Right there.
Which side does he get in?
Passenger side.
And is this still on January 28th?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go to the first video, still at the R&M Market, same date and time. And I'm going to go to, I should ask you, did these two videos have any date or timestamp?
I don't believe so. Some of them, when they recover, they don't always recover the date and time.
I'm going to back All right, 4:14 starting, what do we see here?
That same gentleman inside the store, approaching.
You keep saying that same gentleman. Were you able to identify if the same person, or one person was using her card throughout the night of January 28th?
Yes,
And we'll talk more about that investigation, but who did you determine who that person was?
Mr. Sleep, Anthony Sleep.
Anthony Sleet.
Yes,
Okay, so when you say that gentleman, we're talking about Anthony Sleet?
yes.
Okay. What is he doing there? What is located where he's standing?
He's at the ATM right in the center of the store.
I'm gonna manually fast forward in front of the jury again. How long is he there?
He's there a little bit of time.
And we're at the 10-minute mark. Is he gone now?
Yes,
Okay. Next up, did you obtain some video surveillance from a Kroger
yes,
for the same date?
yes.
Where was that Kroger located?
850 South Hamilton Road, which is right there in Whitehall.
Still in the same location?
Same general area.
I apologize, the same area, not
Yes.
very far?
Yes,
And again, was there a corresponding bank charge with Miss Anderson's card?
yes.
This one. I need my helper to help with the player.
This surveillance was actually recovered by Kroger Security.
Okay. We're actually, for purposes of the record, we're gonna launch the player and drag the file over to it. All right, what part of the Kroger are we looking at here?
The checkout.
Okay. And will you show the jury, just sort of narrate what's happening as we watch this?
He's brought up through, he's assisted with an employee through the checkout.
Can you use your pointer? And
He's
show?
right there.
Okay.
That'd be Mr. Sleet again.
And what does the employee appear to be helping him purchase?
Cigarettes.
Is there a date and time stamp on this?
Yes, there is. It'd be January 28th at 10:46 p.m.
22:46,
Yes,
military time?
yes, military time.
Okay. So still that same night, 10:46 p.m.
Yes.
And did this correspond with one of her bank charges?
Yes, and actually, when they recover the surveillance, they don't go by the images, they actually go by the transaction. So they found the transaction and was able to locate which register it was at. So that's how they do their surveillance.
And when you say they, who are you talking about?
Kroger Security.
So was that different than what you had been doing at the other places?
Yeah, the other places, we actually had to provide them the time and watch the surveillance until we actually saw the person come in. We had the approximate time. With Kroger, we gave them the information, Rachel's information. They were able to see the transaction, and that's how they found their surveillance.
Okay. Now, this has continued to play while you've been testifying, and is Mr. Sleet still at the checkout?
Yes, yes.
What is he doing right now?
Seems like he's been having a problem all evening using the card.
Trying to scan it, flipping it around, different things like that?
Yes,
Does this go on for a little bit?
yes, it does.
Okay. We'll go ahead and stop it then. Close it. Moving on then, did you also respond to the Speedy Mart at 3377 East Livingston?
Yes,
Is that in the same neighborhood area?
yes.
And you mentioned you would have to give dates and times. So Kroger, you told them, hey, we have this transaction at your place.
Yeah, initially I gave them the time and dates like I would any other place, and it goes, that's not how we do it. We do it by transaction, so.
So when you would go to a place like we're gonna talk about, the Speedy Mart, what would you use to say, hey, we wanna look at this particular time?
We provide them the date and times.
Based
we're
on
looking-
what?
The transaction from the bank.
Okay, so you're using her bank record, time, and asking them.
Yes,
But at Kroger, they said, give us the transaction and we'll find it that way.
yes.
All right, so when we're at the Speedy Mart, Amy. All right, so we're gonna go to, just for purposes of the record. Okay. Just for purposes of the record, what was that first screen we saw that had all the kind of different grids on it?
Oh, it's different camera views. Yeah, they're different angles with different cameras.
Did every place you went to have the same kind of video system?
No,
Is this just what Speedy Mart's system looked like?
yes,
All right, so for purposes of the record, we're gonna go to what was marked as, did each of those squares have different camera numbers?
yes,
So we're gonna go to the one that was marked camera 7.
okay.
Okay, now it's pretty hard to see, but does this one have a date and time stamp? How about
Yes,
we
it's
go
down at the bottom.
Up? At the top? How about there? You see it? I'm really doubting your eyes at this point.
You're talking about up here? It's not showing up on this viewer here.
Okay, can you see it up on the big screen up there? Can you see it?
I can see 2018.
All right,
But down at the bottom, there's a date down there and time as well on my bottom right.
okay. I wanna, if I'm gonna, here,
It's 22:59 was the time.
22:50, okay, well, I've already started, so I'm walking. You have the pointer?
I have it right here.
Oh, right. Well, I can't see that as well. Can I use the pointer? Oh. Up here, does it say 2018-01-28?
Yes,
And then you mentioned 22:59. Are you pointing
right here. That's what
down
I'm-
here at the bottom?
Yes,
Okay, but we can also see it up here.
yeah. I just don't get it
22:59.
on this screen. Yep.
Okay. What time is that? Not in military time?
Almost 11 p.m.
Okay. Still on the 28th?
Yes.
All right, I think Ms. Van Kulen has it queued up pretty close. We're gonna go ahead. We're actually gonna try to fast forward just a couple minutes. And just for purposes of the record, we're just sort of making it move a little bit faster here, but in view of the jury. All right, so starting here at 23:02, if you would start letting us know when there was something of evidentiary value to you.
And there be Mr. Sleet walking through the door.
Okay, did you usually?
Yes, I did.
Okay, sorry, I was looking.
It's right there.
Okay. Now, has he walked off screen now?
Yes, he has.
Is there an ATM or anything visible in this one?
No, I
In
believe
this
it's in.
particular angle?
No.
Now I think we're gonna go ahead and advance it, maybe just another minute, or make it go a little quicker, I think, maybe is the easier way to do it. That's okay, just. Are we eventually going to see him re-enter?
Yes, he's right
All
there.
right. What does he appear to be doing?
Beer. Purchasing beer.
Thank you. Doing beer?
Yes.
Thank you. He appears to be purchasing beer. Okay, and did that match up with one of Miss Anderson's bank records?
Yes, it did.
Okay. And was that the surveillance that you could obtain for January 28th?
Yes.
even though the card was used at other locations?
Yes.
Your Honor, I think that's all I need for that for now. Would now be a good time to break?
Okay, we can take our morning break at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I need you back in the jury room at 11. Okay, again, remember the admonitions that I've given you with respect to discussing this case among yourselves or with anyone else. All rise for the jury. All right, counsel, see everyone back right around 11.
Your Honor, just so you know, there's going to be just a handful of questions, and then we're going to get into Mr. Sleet's video, which is approximately an hour long. So just for planning purposes, then we could probably take a break for lunch after that. But I just wanted to let you know how
All right,
the
thank
rest
you.
of it was going to go. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.